on Friday night, we never look back. Here we go, 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 let us heal and grow. You won't be alone, we're unstoppable. Don't be afraid to show what we're going for. This is what we know. Here we come back to life, we're still breathing. Standing up, everybody's gonna see it. Oh, all you need to know is that we're holding on. Even if we fall, we will rise up and we follow the path that we believe in. No, we're not gonna stop until we reach it. Oh, all you need to know is that we're holding on. We rise up from the dust and claim our throne. We rise up from the dust and claim our throne. We rise up from the dust and claim our throne.
Okay, let's get on to it, shall we? So, we're going to start into another of the five dialogues, Phaedo. This is the second one that was recommended to me by Vesper Videoretro, um, and that will be all of the five dialogues we're going to read. For now, we'll come back around to them at some other time. But um, it is too long for me to read in one go, so I'm going to try to get through about half of it tonight, and we'll finish up the rest on Friday. So it's like 61 pages if you include the introductory explanation of it. Um, my voice won't hold out for that long, so we're gonna go for 30 pages. So anyway, here we go. Phaedo. Phaedo, known to the ancients also by the descriptive title On the Soul, is a drama about Socrates' last hours and his death in the jail at Athens. On the way back home to Elis, it's a single L, but Elis, one of his intimates, Phaedo, who was with him then, stops off at Phlius in the Peloponnese. There he reports it all to a group of Pythagoreans or Pythagoreans, whichever you prefer. I've heard it both. I tend towards Pythagoreans. Settled there since their expulsion from southern Italy. The Pythagorean connection is carried further in the dialogue itself, since Socrates' two fellow discussants, Simmias and Cebes from Thebes, the other city, were expelled members of the brotherhoods, where the other city were expelled members of this brotherhood, settled are associates of Philolaus, the leading Pythagorean there. Pythagoreans were noted for their belief in the immortality of the soul and its reincarnation in human or animal form, and for the consequent concern to keep one's soul pure by avoiding contamination with the body so as to win the best possible next life. Socrates weaves all these themes into his own discussion of the immortality of the soul. It is noteworthy that these Pythagorean elements are lacking from the Apology, where Socrates expresses himself non-committally and unconcernedly about the possibility of immortality, and from Crito, as well as the varied discussions of the soul's virtues in such dialogues as Euthyphro, Laches, and I guess Laches, I'm not sure, and Protagoras. Those dialogues are, of course, not records of discussions the historical Socrates actually held, but Plato seems to take particular pains to indicate that Phaedo does not give us Socrates' actual last conversation, or even one that fits at all closely his actual views. He takes care to tell us that he was not present on the last day. Phaedo says he was ill. Socrates makes much of the human intellect's affinity to eternal forms of beauty, justice, and other normative notions, and of mathematical properties and objects such as oddness and evenness, with the integers 2, 3, and the rest, as well as physical forces such as hot and cold, all existing in a non-physical realm accessible only to abstract thought. None of this comports well with Socrates' description of his philosophical interests in the Apology, or with the way he conducts his inquiries in Plato's Socratic dialogues. It is generally agreed that both the Pythagorean motifs of immortality and purification and the theory of eternal forms that is linked with them in this dialogue are Plato's own contribution. Indeed, Phaedo's affinities in philosophical theory go not toward the Socratic dialogues, but to Symposium and Republic. There is an unmistakable reference to Meno's theory of theoretical knowledge, of geometry, and also of the nature of human virtue, as coming by recollection of objects known before birth. But now the claim is made that this recollection is of forms. Phaedo concludes with a myth describing the fate of the soul after death. Concluding myths in other dialogues with which this one should be compared are those in Gorgias and Republic. It should also be compared with the myth in Socrates' second speech in Phaedrus. Despite the Platonic innovations in philosophical theory, Phaedo presents a famously moving picture of Socrates' deep commitment to philosophy and the philosophical life, even or especially in the face of an unjustly imposed death. Okay, so that's the intro. Um, I don't know how to pronounce this first name. So there's a dialogue again, at least for part of this. I'm going to say Echecrates. I'm sorry. It's I've never seen the name before. I've never heard anybody pronounce it. So it's Echecrates. So if it's Socrates, I'm gonna go Echecrates. That seems good enough. Okay, so Echecrates, were you with Socrates yourself, Phaedo, on the day when he drank the poison in prison, or did someone else tell you about it? Phaedo, I was there myself, Echecrates. Echecrates, what are the things he said before he died, and how did he die? I should be glad to hear this. Hardly anyone from Phlius visits Athens nowadays, nor has any stranger come from Athens for some time who could give us a clear account of what happened, except that he drank the poison and died, but nothing more. Phaedo, did you not even hear how the trial went? Echecrates, yes, someone did tell us about that, and we wondered that he seems to have died a long time after the trial took place. Why was that, Phaedo? Phaedo, that was by chance, Echecrates. The day before the trial, as it happened, the prow of the ship that the Athenians sent to Delos had been crowned with garlands. Echecrates, what ship is that? Phaedo, it is the ship in which the Athenians say Theseus once sailed to Crete, taking with him the 2 lots of 7 victims. He saved them and was himself saved. The Athenians vowed then to Apollo, so the story goes, that if they were saved they would send a mission to Delos every year, and from that time to this they send such an annual mission to the god. They have a law to keep the city pure while it lasts, and no execution may take place once the mission has begun, until the ship has made its journey to Delos and returned to Athens, and this can sometimes take a long time if the winds delay it. The mission begins when the priest of Apollo crowns the prow of the ship, and this happened, as I say, the day before Socrates' trial. That is why Socrates was in prison a long time between his trial and his execution. Echecrates, What about his actual death, Phaedo? What did he say? What did he do? Who of his friends were with him? Or did the authorities not allow them to be present, and he died with no friends present? Phaedo. By no means. Some were present, in fact, a good many. Echecrates. Please, please be good enough to tell us all that occurred as fully as possible, unless you have some pressing business. Oh, and we're in an ad. So I will pause there while we wait for the ad to finish. And I'll just go with Phaedo's last question, or no, his last answer, by no means. And we'll go from there. I don't like that there are ads. I could turn them off, but then I wouldn't make any kind of revenue. Not that I make a lot. Okay, Phaedo. By no means. Some were present, in fact, a good many. Echecrates. Please be good enough to tell us all that occurred as fully as possible, unless you have some pressing business. Phaedo. I have the time, and I will try to tell you the whole story. For nothing gives me more pleasure than to call Socrates to mind, whether talking about him myself or listening to someone else do so. Echecrates. Your hearers will surely be like you in this. Phaedo, this Phaedo. So do try to tell us every detail as exactly as you can. Phaedo, I certainly found being there an astonishing experience. Although I was witnessing the death of one who was my friend, I had no feeling of pity, for the man appeared happy in both manner and words as he died nobly and without fear. Echecrates, so that it struck me that even in going down to the underworld he was going with the god's blessing, and that he would fare well when he got there, if anyone ever does. That is why I had no feeling of pity, such as would seem natural in my sorrow, nor indeed of pleasure as we engaged in philosophical discussion as we were accustomed to do, for our arguments were of that sort, but I had a strange feeling, an unaccustomed mixture of pleasure and pain at the same time, as I reflected that he was just about to die. All of us present were affected in much the same way, sometimes laughing, then weeping, especially one of us, Apollodorus. You know the man and his ways. Echecrates. Of course I do. Phaedo. He was quite overcome, but I was myself disturbed, and so were the others. Echecrates. Who, Phaedo, were those present? Phaedo. Among the local people there was Apollodorus, whom I mentioned, Critobulus and his father, also Hermogenes, Epigenes, Aeschines, and Antisthenes. Uh, Geez, some of these names are difficult. Um, Stesippus of Pania was there, Menexenus, and some others. Plato, I believe, was ill. Echecrates. Were there some foreigners present? Phaedo. Yes, Simmias from Thebes, with Cebes and Phaedondes, and from Megara, Euclides and Terpsion. Echecrates. What about Aristippus and Cleombrotus? Were they there? Phaedo. No, they were said to be in Aegina. No. Echecrates. Was there anyone else? Phaedo. I think these were about all. Echecrates. Well then, what do you say the conversation was about? Phaedo. I will try to tell you everything from the beginning. On the previous days also, both the others and I used to visit Socrates. We foregathered at daybreak at the court where the trial took place, for it was close to the prison, and each day we used to wait around talking until the prison should open, for it did not open early. When it opened, we used to go in to Socrates and spend most of the day with him. On this day we gathered rather early, because when we left the prison on the previous evening, we were informed that the ship from Delos had arrived, and so we told each other to come to the usual place as early as possible. When we arrived, the gatekeeper who used to answer our knock came out and told us to wait and not go in until he told us to. The 11, he said, are freeing Socrates from his bonds and telling him how his death will take place today. After a short time he came and told us to go in. We found Socrates recently released from his chains, and Xanthippe, you know her, sitting by him holding their baby. When she saw us, she cried out and said the sort of thing that women usually say. Socrates, this is the last time your friends will talk to you and you to them. Socrates looked at Crito. Crito, he said, let someone take her home. And some of Crito's people led her away, lamenting and beating her breast. Socrates sat up on the bed, bent his leg, and rubbed it with his hand. And as he rubbed, he said, what a strange thing that which men call pleasure seems to be, and how astonishing the relation it has with what is thought to be its opposite, namely pain. A man cannot have both at the same time, yet if he pursues and catches the one, he is almost always bound to catch the other also, like two creatures with one head. I think that if Aesop had noted this, he would have composed a fable that a god wished to reconcile their opposition, but could not do so, so he joined their two heads together, and therefore, when a man has the one, the other follows later. This seems to be happening to me. My bonds caused pain in my leg, and now pleasure seems to be following. Cebes intervened and said, by Zeus, yes, Socrates, you did well to remind me. Evenus asked me the day before yesterday, as others had done before, what induced you to write poetry after you came to prison. You who had never composed any poetry before, putting the fables of Aesop into verse and composing the hymn to Apollo. If it is of any concern to you that I should have an answer to give to Evenus, then he repeats his questions as I know he will. When he repeats his question, as I know he will, tell me what to say to him. Tell him the truth, Cebes, he said, that I did not do this with the idea of rivaling him or his poems, for I knew that would not be easy, but I tried to find out the meaning of certain dreams, and to satisfy my conscience, in case it was this kind of art they were frequently bidding me to practice. The dreams were something like this. The same dream often came to me in the past, now in one shape, now in another, but saying the same things. Socrates, it said, practice and cultivate the arts. In the past I imagined that it was instructing and advising me to do what I was doing, such as those who encourage runners in a race, that the dream was thus bidding me to do the very thing I was doing, namely to practice the art of philosophy, this being the highest kind of art, and I was doing that. But now, after my trial took place, and the festival of the god was preventing my execution, I thought that, in case my dream was bidding me to practice this popular art, I should not disobey it, but compose poetry. I thought it safer not to leave here until I had satisfied my conscience by writing poems in obedience to the dream. So I first wrote in honor of the god of the present festival. After that I realized that a poet, if he is to be a poet, must compose fables, not arguments. Being no teller of fables myself, I took the stories I knew and had at hand, the fables of Aesop, and I versified the first ones I came across. Tell this to Evenus, Cebes. Wish him well and bid him farewell, and tell him, if he is wise, to follow me as soon as possible. I am leaving today, it seems, as the Athenians so order it. Said Simmias, what kind of advice is this you are giving to Evenus, Socrates? I have met him many times, and from my observation he is not at all likely to follow it willingly. How so, said he, is Evenus not a philosopher? Is Evenus not a philosopher? I think so, Simmias said. Then Evenus will be willing, like every man who partakes worthily of philosophy, yet perhaps he will not take his own life, for that, they say, is not right. As he said this, Socrates put his feet on the ground and remained in this position during the rest of the conversation. Then Cebes asked, how do you mean, Socrates, that it is not right to do one's self violence, and yet that the philosopher will be willing to follow one who is dying? Come now, Cebes, have you and Simmias, who keep company with Philolaus, not heard about such things? Nothing definite, Socrates. Indeed, I too speak about this from hearsay, but I do not mind telling you what I have heard, for it is perhaps most appropriate for one who is about to depart yonder to tell and examine tales about what we believe that journey to be like. What else could one do in the time we have until sunset? But whatever is the reason, Socrates, for people to say that it is not right to kill oneself? As to your question just now, I have heard Philolaus say this when staying in Thebes, and I have also heard it from others, but I have never heard anyone give a clear account of the matter. Well, he said, we must do our best, and you may yet hear one, and it may well astonish you if this subject alone of all things is simple, and it is never, as with everything else, better at certain times and for certain people to die than to live. And if this is so, you may well find it astonishing that those for whom it is better to die are wrong to help themselves, and that they must wait for someone else to benefit them. And Cebes, lapsing into his own dialect, laughed quietly and said, Zeus knows it is. Indeed, said Socrates, it does seem unreasonable, but when put like that, but perhaps there is reason to it. There is the explanation that is put in the language of the mysteries that we men are in a kind of prison, and that one must not free oneself or run away. That seems to me an impressive doctrine, and one not easy to understand fully. However, Cebes, this seems to me well expressed, that the gods are our guardians, and that men are one of their possessions. Or do you not think so? I do, said Cebes. And would you not be angry if one of your possessions killed itself, when you had not given any sign that you wished it to die, and if you had any punishment you could inflict, you would inflict it? Certainly, he said. Perhaps, then, put in this way, it is not unreasonable that one should not kill oneself before a god had indicated some necessity to do so, like the necessity now put upon us. That seems likely, said Cebes. As for what you were saying, that philosophers should be willing and ready to die, that seems strange, Socrates, if what we said just now is reasonable, namely that a god is our protector and that we are his possessions. It is not logical that the wisest of men should not resent leaving this service in which they are governed by the best of masters, the gods, for a wise man cannot believe that he will look after himself better when he is free. A foolish man might easily think so, that he must escape from his master. He would not reflect that one must not escape from a good master, but stay with him as long as possible, because it would be foolish to escape. But the sensible man would want always to remain with one better than himself. So, Socrates, the opposite of what was said before is likely to be true. The wise would resent dying, whereas the foolish would rejoice at it. I thought that when Socrates heard this, he was pleased by Cebes' argumentation. Glancing at us, he said, Cebes is always on the track of some arguments. He is certainly not willing to be at once convinced by what one says. Said Simmias. But actually, Socrates, I think myself that Cebes has a point now. Why should truly wise men want to avoid the service of masters better than themselves and leave them easily? And I think Cebes is aiming his argument at you, because you are leaving us so lightly, and leaving those good masters, as you say yourself, the gods. You are both justified in what you say, and I think you mean that I must make a defense against this, as if I were in court. You certainly must, said Simmias. Come then, he said, let me try to make my defense to you more convincing than it was to the jury. For Simmias and Cebes, I should be wrong not to resent dying if I did not believe that I should go first to other wise and good gods, and then to men who have died and are better than men are here. Be assured that, as it is, I expect to join the company of good men. This last I would not altogether insist on, but if I insist on anything at all in these matters, it is that I shall come to gods who are very good masters. That is why I am not resentful, because I have good hope that some future awaits men after death, as we have been told for years, a much better future for the good than for the wicked. Well now, Socrates, said Simmias, do you intend to keep this belief to yourself as you leave us, or should you share it with us? I certainly think it would be a blessing for us too, and at the same time it would be your defense if you convince us of what you say. I will try, he said, but first let me see what it is that Crito here has, I think, been wanting to say for quite a while. What else, Socrates, said Crito, but what the man who is to give you the poison has been telling me for some time, that I should warn you to talk as little as possible. People get heated when they talk, he says, and one should not be heated when taking the poison, as those who do must sometimes drink it 2 or 3 times. Socrates replied, take no notice of him, only let him be prepared to administer it twice, or, if necessary, 3 times. I was rather sure you would say that, Crito said, but he has been bothering me for some time. Let him be, he said. I want to make my argument before you, my judges, as to why I think that a man who has truly spent his life in philosophy is probably right to be of good cheer in the face of death, and to be very hopeful that after death he will attain the greatest blessings yonder. I will try to tell you, Simmias and Cebes, how this may be so. I am afraid that other people do not realize that the one aim of those who practice philosophy in the proper manner is to practice for dying and death. Now, if this is true, it would be strange indeed if they were eager for this all their lives and then resent it when they have wanted and practiced for a long time comes upon them. Simmias laughed and said, by Zeus, Socrates, you made me laugh, though I was in no laughing mood just now. I think that the majority, on hearing this, will think that it describes the philosophers very well, and our people in Thebes would thoroughly agree that philosophers are nearly dead, and that the majority of men is well aware that they deserve to be. And they would be telling the truth, Simmias, except for their being aware. They are not aware of the way true philosophers are nearly dead, nor of the way they deserve to be, nor of the sort of death they deserve. But never mind them, he said, let us talk among ourselves. Do we believe that there is such a thing as death? Certainly, said Simmias. Is it anything else than the separation of the soul from the body? Do we believe that death is this, namely, that the body comes to be separated by itself apart from the soul, and the soul comes to be separated by itself apart from the body? Is death anything else than that? No, that is what it is, he said. Consider then, my good sir, whether you share my opinion, for this will lead us to a better knowledge of what we are investigating. Do you think it is the part of the philosopher to be concerned with such so-called pleasures as those of food and drink? By no means. What about the pleasures of sex? Not at all. What of the other pleasures concerned with the service of the body? Do you think such a man prizes them greatly, the acquisition of distinguished clothes and shoes, and the other bodily ornaments? Do you think he values these, or despises them, except in so far as one cannot do without them? I think the true philosopher despises them. Do you not think, he said, that in general such a man's concern is not with the body, but that, as far as he can, he turns away from the body towards the soul? I do. So, in the first place, such things show clearly that the philosopher, more than other men, frees the soul from association with the body as much as possible? Apparently. A man who finds no pleasure in such things, and has no part in them, is thought by the majority not to deserve to live, and to be close to death. The man, that is, who does not care for the pleasures of the body, what you say is certainly true. Then what about the actual acquiring of knowledge? Is the body an obstacle when one associates with it in the search for knowledge? I mean, for example, do men find any truth in sight or hearing, or are not even the poets forever telling us that we do not see or hear anything accurately? And surely if those two physical senses are not clear or precise, our other senses can hardly be accurate, as they are all inferior to these. Do you not think so? I certainly do, he said. When, then, he asked, does the soul grasp the truth? For whenever it attempts to examine anything with the body, it is clearly deceived by it. True. Is it not in reasoning, if anywhere, that any reality becomes clear to the soul? Yes. And indeed, the soul reasons best when none of these senses troubles it, neither hearing nor sight nor pain nor pleasure, but when it is most by itself, taking leave of the body, and as far as possible having no contact or association with it in its search for reality. That is so. And it is then that the soul of the philosopher most disdains the body, flees from it, and seeks to be by itself? It appears so. What about the following, Simmias? Do we say that there is such a thing as the just itself, or not? We do say so, by Zeus. And the beautiful and the good? Of course. And have you ever seen any of these things with your eyes? In no way, he said. Or have you ever grasped them with any of your bodily senses? I am speaking of all things such as bigness, health, strength, and in a word the reality of all other things, that which each of them essentially is what is most true in them contemplated through the body, or is this the position? Whoever of us prepares himself best and most accurately to grasp that thing itself which he is investigating will come closest to the knowledge of it? Obviously. Then he will do this most perfectly who approaches the object with thought alone, without associating any sight with his thought, or dragging in any sense perception with his reasoning, but who, using pure thought alone, tries to track down each reality pure and by itself, freeing himself as far as possible from eyes and ears, and in a word, from the whole body, because the body confuses the soul and does not allow it to acquire truth and wisdom whenever it is associated with it. Will not that man reach reality, Simmias, if anyone does? What you say, said Simmias, is indeed true. All these things will necessarily make the true philosophers believe and say to each other something like this: there is likely to be something such as a path to guide us out of our confusion, because as long as we have a body and our soul is fused with such an evil, we shall never adequately attain what we desire, which we affirm to be the truth. The body keeps us busy in 1,000 ways because of its need for nurture. Moreover, if certain diseases befall it, they impede our search for the truth. It fills us with wants, desires, fears, all sorts of illusions, and much nonsense, so that, as it is said, in truth and in fact, no thought of any kind ever comes to us from the body. Only the body and its desires cause war, civil discord, and battles, for all wars are due to the desire to acquire wealth, and it is the body and the care of it to which we are enslaved, which compel us to acquire wealth, and all this makes us too busy to practice philosophy. Worst of all, if we do not if Worst of all, if we do get some respite from it and turn to some investigation, everywhere in our investigations the body is present and makes for confusion and fear so that it prevents us from seeing the truth. It really has been shown to us that if we are ever to have pure knowledge, we must escape from the body and observe things in themselves with the soul by itself. It seems likely that we shall only then, when we are dead, attain that which we desire and of which we claim to be lovers, namely, wisdom, as our argument shows, not while we live. For if it is impossible to attain any pure knowledge with the body, then one of two things is true. Either we can never attain knowledge, or we can do so after death. Then and not before, the soul is by itself apart from the body. While we live, we shall be closest to knowledge if we refrain as much as possible from association with the body, and do not join with it more than we must. If we are not infected with its nature, but purify ourselves from it until the God himself frees us, in this way we shall escape the contamination of the body's folly. We shall be likely to be in the company of people of the same kind, and by our own efforts we shall know all that is pure, which is presumably the truth, for it is not permitted to the impure to attain the pure. Such are the things, Simmias, that all those who love learning in the proper manner must say to one another, and believe. Or do you not think so? I certainly do, Socrates. And if this is true, my friend, said Socrates, there is good hope that on arriving where I am going, if anywhere, I shall acquire what has been our chief preoccupation in our past life, so that the journey that is now ordered for me is full of good hope, as it is also for any other man who believes that his mind has been prepared and, as it were, purified. It certainly is, said Simmias. And does purification not turn out to be what we mentioned in our argument some time ago, namely, to separate the soul as far as possible from the body and accustom it to gather itself and collect itself out of every part of the body, and to dwell by itself as far as it can, both now and in the future, freed, as it were, from the bonds of the body? Certainly, he said. And that freedom and separation of the soul from the body is called death? That is altogether so. It is only those who practice philosophy in the right way, we say, who always most want to free the soul, and this release and separation of the soul from the body is the preoccupation of the philosophers. So it appears. Therefore, as I said at the beginning, it would be ridiculous for a man to train himself in life to live in a state as close to death as possible, and then to resent it when it comes. Ridiculous, of course. In fact, Simmias, he said, those who practice philosophy in the right way are in training for dying, and they fear death least of all men. Consider it from this point of view. If they are altogether estranged from the body and desire to have their soul by itself, would it not be quite absurd for them to be afraid and resentful when this happens? If they did not gladly set out for a place where, on arrival, they may hope to attain that for which they had yearned during their lifetime, that is wisdom, and where they would be rid of the presence of that from which they are estranged? Many of the Many men, at the death of their lovers, wives, or sons, were willing to go to the underworld, driven by the hope of seeing there those for whose company they longed, and being with them. Will then a true lover of wisdom, who has a familiar hope and knows that he will never find it to any extent except in Hades, be resentful of dying and not gladly undertake the journey thither? One must surely think so, my friend, if he is a true philosopher, for he is firmly convinced that he will not find pure knowledge anywhere except there. And if this is so, then, as I said just now, would it not be highly unreasonable for such a man to fear death? It certainly would, by Zeus, he said. Then you have sufficient indication, he said, that any man whom you see resenting death was not a lover of wisdom, but a lover of the body, and also a lover of wealth or of honors, either or both. It is certainly as you say. And Simmias, he said, does not what is called courage belong especially to men of this disposition? Most certainly. And the quality of moderation, which even majority call by that name, that is, not to get swept off one's feet by one's passions, but to treat them with disdain and orderliness, is this not suited only to those who most of all despise the body and live the life of philosophy? Necessarily so, he said. If you are willing to reflect on the courage and moderation of other people, you will find them strange. In what way, Socrates? You know that they all consider death a great evil? Definitely, he said. And the brave among them face death, when they do, for fear of greater evils? That is so. Therefore, it is fear and terror that make all men brave, except the philosophers. Yet it is illogical to be brave through fear and cowardice. It certainly is. What of the moderate among them? Is their experience not similar? Is it licentiousness of a kind that makes them moderate? We say this is impossible, yet their experience of this simple-minded moderation turns out to be similar. They fear to be deprived of other pleasures which they desire, so they keep away from some pleasures because they are overcome by others. Now to be mastered by pleasure is what they call licentiousness, but what happens to them is that they master certain pleasures because they are mastered by others. This is like what we mentioned just now, that in some way it is a kind of licentiousness that has made them moderate. That seems likely. My good Simmias, I fear this is not the right exchange to attain virtue. To exchange pleasures for pleasures, pains for pains, and fears for fears, the greater for the less, like coins, but that the only valid currency for which all these things should be exchanged is wisdom. With this we have real courage and moderation and justice, and in a word, true virtue with wisdom, whether pleasures and fears and all such things be present or absent. When these are exchanged for one another in separation from wisdom, such virtue is only illusory, appearance of virtue. It is in fact fit for slaves, without soundness or truth, whereas in truth, moderation and courage and justice are a purging away of all such things, and wisdom itself is a kind of cleansing or purification. It is likely that those who established the mystic rites for us were not inferior persons, but were speaking in riddles long ago when they said that whoever arrives in the underworld uninitiated and unsanctified will wallow in the mire, whereas he who arrives there purified and initiated will dwell with the gods. There are indeed, as those concerned with the mysteries say, many who carries the thyrsus, but the bacchants are few. These latter are, in my opinion, no other than those who have practiced philosophy in the right way. I have in my life left nothing undone in order to be counted among these as far as possible, as I have been eager to be in every way. Whether my eagerness was right and we accomplished anything, we shall, I think, know for certain in a short time, God willing, on arriving yonder. This is my defense, Simmias and Cebes, that I am likely to be right to leave you and my masters here without resentment or complaint, believing that there, as here, I shall find good masters and good friends. If my defense is more convincing to you than to the Athenian jury, it will be well. When Socrates finished, Cebes intervened. Socrates, he said, everything else you said is excellent, I think, but men find it very hard to believe what you said about the soul. They think that after it has left the body, it no longer exists anywhere, but that it is destroyed and dissolved on the day the man dies, as soon as it leaves the body, and that on leaving it, it is dispersed like breath or smoke, has flown away and gone, and is no longer anything anywhere. If indeed it gathered itself together and existed by itself, and escaped those evils you were recently enumerating, there would then be such much good hope, Socrates, that what you say is true. But to believe this requires a good deal of faith and persuasive argument. To believe that the soul still exists after a man has died, and that it still possesses some capability and intelligence. What you say is true, Cebes, Socrates said, but what shall we do? Do you want to discuss whether this is likely to be true or not? Personally, said Cebes, I would like to hear your opinion on the subject. I do not think, said Socrates, that anyone who heard me now, not even a comic poet, could say that I am babbling and discussing things that do not concern me, so we must examine the question thoroughly. If you think we should do so, let us examine it in such a manner as this, whether the souls of men who have died exist in the underworld or not. We recall an ancient theory that souls arriving there came from here, and then again that they arrive here and are born here from the dead. If that is true, that the living come back from the dead, then surely our souls must exist there, for they could not come back if they did not exist. And this is a sufficient proof that these things are so, if it truly appears that the living never come from any other source than from the dead. If this is not the case, we should need another argument. Quite so, said Cebes. Oh. Art by Shrike. Remove. Okay. Wait, this is a reading? Yeah, it's a reading. Of course it's a reading. That's what I do. I read because other people don't read. So feel free to discuss it in the chat all you'd like. But yeah, I do the reading. That's why I'm here. So have at it. Do not, he said, confine yourselves to humanity if you want to understand this more readily, but take all animals and all plants into account, and in short, for all things which come to be. Let us see whether they come to be in this way, that is, from their opposites, if they have such, as the beautiful is the opposite of the ugly, and the just of the unjust, and 1,000 other things of the kind. Let us examine whether those that have an opposite must necessarily come to be from their opposite and from nowhere else. As, for example, when something comes to be larger, it must necessarily become larger from having been smaller before. Yes. Then if something smaller comes to be, it will come from something larger before, which became smaller? That is so, he said. And the weaker comes to be from the stronger, and the swifter from the slower? Certainly. Further, if something worse comes to be, does it not come from the better, and the juster from the more unjust? Of course. So we have sufficiently established that all things come to be in this way. Opposites from opposites? Certainly. Excuse me. There is a further point, something such as this, about these opposites. Between each of these pairs of opposites there are two processes, from the one to the other, and then again from the other to the first. Between the larger and the smaller there is increase and decrease, and and we call the one increasing and the other decreasing? Yes, he said. And so too there is separation and combination, cooling and heating, and all such things, even if sometimes we do not have a name for the process. But in fact it must be everywhere that they come to be from one another, and that there is a process of becoming from each into the other? Assuredly, he said. Well then, is there an opposite to living, as sleeping is the opposite of being awake? Quite so, he said. What is it? being dead, he said. Therefore, if these are opposites, they come to be from one another, and there are two processes of generation between the two? Of course. I will tell you, said Socrates, one of the two pairs I was just talking about, the pair itself and the two processes, and you will tell me the other. I mean, to sleep and to be awake. To be awake comes from sleeping, and to sleep comes from being awake. But of the two processes, one is going to sleep and the other is waking up. Do you accept that or not? Certainly. You will tell me in the same way about life and death. Do you not say that to be dead is the opposite of being alive? I do. And they come to be from one another? Yes. What comes to be from being alive? Being dead. And what comes to being from being dead? One must agree that it is being alive. Then Cebes, living creatures and things come to be from the dead? So it appears, he said. Then our souls exist in the underworld. That seems likely. Then in this case, some of the two processes of becoming is what? Wait a minute. I misread that. I misread a word there. Sorry. Then in this case, one of the two processes of becoming is clear, for dying is clear enough, is it not? It certainly is. What shall we do then? Shall we not supply the opposite process of becoming? Is nature to be lame in this case, or must we provide a process of becoming opposite to dying? We surely must. And what is that? Coming to life again. Therefore, he said, if there is such a thing as coming to life again, it would be a process of coming from the dead to the living? Quite so. It is agreed between us, then, that the living come from the dead in this way no less than the dead from the living, and if that is so, it seems to be a sufficient proof that the souls of the dead must be somewhere whence they can come back again. I think so, Socrates, he said, that this follows from what we have agreed on. Consider in this way, Cebes, he said, that as I think we are not wrong to agree, if the two processes of becoming did not always balance each other, as if they were going around in a circle, but generation proceeded from one point to its opposite in a straight line, and it did not turn back again to the other opposite, or take any turning, do you realize that all things would ultimately be in the same state, be affected in the same way, and cease to become? What do you mean? He said. It is not hard to understand what I mean. If, for example, there was such a process as going to sleep, but no corresponding process of waking up, you realize that in the end, everything would show the story of Endymion to have no meaning. There would be no point to it because everything would have the same experience as he had and be asleep. And if everything were combined and nothing separated, the saying of Anaxagoras would soon be true, that all things were mixed together. In the same way, my dear Cebes, if everything that partakes of life were to die and remain in that state and not come to life again, would not everything ultimately have to be dead and nothing alive? Even if the living came from some other source and all that lived died, how could all things avoid being absorbed in death? It could not, Socrates, said Cebes, and I think what you say is altogether true. I think, Cebes, said he, that this is very definitely the case, and that we are not deceived when we agree on this. Coming to life again in truth exists. The living come to be from the dead, and the souls of the dead exist. Furthermore, Socrates, Cebes rejoined, such is also the case if that theory is true that you are accustomed to mention frequently, that for us learning is no other than recollection. According to this, we must at some previous time have learned what we now recollect. This is possible only if our soul existed somewhere before it took on this human shape. So according to this theory, too, the soul is likely to be something immortal. Cebes, Simmias interrupted, what are the proofs of this? Remind me, for I do not quite recall them at the moment. There is one excellent argument, said Cebes, namely, that when men are interrogated in the right manner, they always give the right answer of their own accord, and that and they could not do so if they did not possess the knowledge and the right explanation inside them. Then if one shows them a diagram or something else of that kind, this will show most clearly that such is the case. If this does not convince you, Simmias, said Socrates, see whether you agree if we examine it in some such way as this. For do you doubt that what we call learning is recollection? It is not that I doubt, said Simmias, but I want to experience the very thing we are discussing, recollection, and from what Cebes undertook to say, I am now remembering and am pretty nearly convinced. Nevertheless, I should like to hear now the way you are intending to explain it. This way, he said. We surely agree that if anyone recollects anything, he must have known it before. Quite so, he said. Do we not also agree that when knowledge comes to mind in this way, it is recollection? Why, what way do I mean? Like this. When a man sees or hears or in some other way perceives one thing and not only knows that thing, but also thinks of another thing of which the knowledge is not the same but different, are we not right to say that he recollects the second thing that comes into his mind? How do you mean? Things such as this. To know a man is surely a different knowledge from knowing a liar. Of course. Well, you know what happens to lovers whenever they see a lyre, a garment, or anything else that their beloved is accustomed to use. They know the lyre, and the image of the boy to whom it belongs comes into their mind. This is recollection, just as someone, on seeing Simmias, often recollects Cebes, and there are thousands of other such occurrences. Thousands indeed, said Simmias. Is this kind of thing not recollection of a kind, he said, especially so when one experiences it about things that one had forgotten, because one had not seen them for some time? Quite so. Further, he said, can a man seeing the picture of a horse or a lyre recollect a man, or seeing a picture of Simmias recollect Cebes? Certainly. Or seeing a picture of Simmias recollect Simmias himself? He certainly can. In all these cases, the recollection can be occasioned by things that are similar, but it can also be occasioned by things that are dissimilar. It can. When the recollection is caused by similar things, must one not of necessity also experience this, to consider whether the similarity to that which one recollects is deficient in any respect or complete? One must. Consider, he said, whether this is the case. We say that there is something that is equal. I do not mean a stick equal to a stick, or a stone to a stone, or anything of that kind, but something else beyond all these, the equal itself. Shall we say that this exists or not? Indeed we shall, by Zeus, said Simmias, most definitely. And do you know what this is? Certainly. Whether we have... Whence have we acquired the knowledge of it? Is it not from the thing we mentioned just now, from seeing sticks or stones or some other things that are equal, we come to think of that other which is different from them? Or does it seem to you to be different? Look at also this way. Do not equal stones and sticks sometimes, while remaining the same, appear to one to be equal and to another to be unequal? Certainly they do. But what of the equals themselves? Have they ever appeared unequal to you, or equality to be inequality? Never, Socrates. These equal things and the equal itself are therefore not the same? I do not think they are the same at all, Socrates. But it is definitely from the equal things, though they are different, from that equal that you have derived and grasped the knowledge of equality? Very true, Socrates. Whether it be like them or unlike them? Certainly. It makes no difference, as long as the sight of one thing makes you think of another, whether it be similar or dissimilar. This must of necessity be recollection? Quite so. Well then, he said, Do we experience something like this in the case of equal sticks and the other equal objects we just mentioned? Do they seem to us to be equal in the same sense as what is equal itself? Is there some deficiency in their being such as the equal, or is there not? A considerable deficiency, he said. Whenever someone, on seeing something, realizes that that which he now sees wants to be like some other reality but falls short and cannot be like that other since it is inferior, do we agree that the one who thinks this must have prior knowledge of that to which he says it is like, but deficiently so? Necessarily. Well, do we also experience this about the equal objects and the equal itself, or do we not? Very definitely. We must then possess knowledge of the equal before that time when we first saw the equal objects and realized that all these objects strive to be like the equal but are deficient in this. That is so. Then surely we also agree that this conception of ours derives from seeing or touching or some other sense perception, and cannot come into our mind in any other way, for all these senses, I say, are the same. They are the same, Socrates, at any rate in respect to that which our argument wishes to make plain. Our sense perceptions must surely make us realize that all that we perceive through them is striving to reach that which is equal but falls short of it. Or how do we express it? Like that. Then before we begin to see or hear or otherwise perceive, we must have possessed knowledge of the equal itself if we were about to prefer our sense perceptions of equal objects to it. I'm sorry, did I say prefer? Refer our sense perceptions of equal objects to it, and realize that all of them were eager to be like it, but were inferior. That follows from what has been said, Socrates. But we begin to. Sorry, I'm stumbling so much. But we began to see and hear and otherwise perceive right after death? Certainly. We must then have knowledge. Again, I apologize. We must then have acquired the knowledge of the equal before this? Yes. It seems then that we must have possessed it before birth. It seems so. Therefore, if we had this knowledge, we knew before birth and immediately after not only the equal, but the greater and the smaller, and all such things, for our present argument is no more about the equal than about the beautiful itself, the good itself, the just, the pious, and, as I say, about all those things which we mark with the seal of what it is, both when we are putting questions and answering them. So we must have acquired knowledge of them all before we were born. That is so. If we have acquired this knowledge in each case, we have not forgotten it. We remain knowing and have knowledge throughout our life. For to know is to acquire knowledge, keep it, and not lose it. Do we not call the losing of knowledge forgetting? Most certainly, Socrates, he said. But I think if we acquired this knowledge before birth, then lost it at birth, and then later by then later by the use of our senses in connection with those objects we mentioned, we recovered the knowledge we had before, would not what we call learning be the recovery of our own knowledge, and we are right to call this recollection? Certainly. It was seen to be possible for someone to see or hear or otherwise perceive something, and by this to be put in mind of something else, which he had forgotten and which is related to it by similarity or difference. One of two things follows, as I say. Either we were born with the knowledge of it, and all of us know it throughout life, or those who later, we say, are learning, are only recollecting, and learning would be recollection. That is certainly the case, Socrates. Which Which alternative do you choose, Simmias? That we are born with this knowledge, or that we recollect later the things of which we had knowledge previously? I have no means of choosing at the moment, Socrates. Well, can you make this choice? What is your opinion about it? A man who has knowledge would be able to give an account of what he knows, or would he not? He must certainly be able to do so, Socrates, he said. And do you think everybody can give an account of the things we were mentioning just now? I wish they could, said Simmias, but I'm afraid it is much more likely that by this time tomorrow there will be no one left who can do so adequately. So you do not think that everybody has knowledge of these things? No, indeed. So they recollect what they once learned? They must. When did our souls acquire the knowledge of them? Certainly not since we were born as men. Indeed, no. Before that, then? Yes. So then, Simmias, our souls also existed apart from the body before they took on human form, and they had intelligence. Unless we acquire the knowledge at the moment of birth, Socrates, for that time is still left to us. Quite so, my friend. But at what other time do we lose it? We just now agreed that we are not born with that knowledge. Do we then lose it at the very time we acquire it, or can you mention any other time? I cannot, Socrates. I did not realize that I was talking nonsense. So this is our position, Simmias, he said. If those realities we are always talking about exist, the beautiful and the good and all that kind of reality, and we refer all the things we perceive to that reality, discovering that it existed before and is ours, and we compare these things with it, then just as they exist, so our soul must exist before we are born. If these realities do not exist, then this argument is altogether futile. If this is this the position, that there is an equal necessity for those realities to exist and for our souls to exist before we were born? If the former did not exist, neither do the latter? I do not think, Socrates, said Simmias, that there is any possible doubt that it is equally necessary for both to exist, and it is opportune that our argument comes to this conclusion, that our soul exists before we are born, and equally so that reality of which you are now speaking. Nothing is so evident to me personally as that all such things must certainly exist, the beautiful, the good, and all those you mentioned just now. I also think that sufficient proof of this has been given. Then what about Cebes, said Socrates, for we must persuade Cebes also. He is sufficiently convinced, I think, said Simmias, though he is the most difficult of men to persuade by argument, but I believe him to be fully convinced that our soul existed before we were born. I do not think myself, however, that it has been proved that the soul continues to exist after death. The opinion of the majority which Cebes mentioned still stands, that when a man dies his soul is dispersed, and this is the end of its existence. What is to prevent the soul coming to be and being constituted from some other source, existing before it enters a human body, and then, having done so and departed from it, itself dying and being destroyed? You are right, Simmias, said Cebes. Half of what needed proof has been proved, namely that our soul existed before we were born, but further proof is needed that it exists not less after we have died, if the proof is to be complete. It has been proved even now, Simmias and Cebes, said Socrates. If you are ready to combine this argument with the one we agreed on before, that every living thing must come from the dead, if the soul exists before, it must, as it comes to life and birth, come from nowhere else than death and being dead. So how could it avoid existing after death, since it must be born again? What you speak of has then even now been proved. However, I think you and Simmias would like to discuss the argument more fully. You seem to have this childish fear that the wind would really dissolve and scatter the soul as it leaves the body, especially if one happens to die in a high wind and not in calm weather. I'm waiting for an ad to start. It's maybe it won't. I don't know. They're weird. Sebes laughed and said, "Assuming were we were afraid, Socrates, try to change our minds, or rather, do not assume that we are afraid, but perhaps there is a child in us who has these fears. Try to persuade him not to fear death like a bogey." "You should," said Socrates, "sing a charm over him every day until you have charmed away his fears." Ah, there goes our ad. Okay, I'm going to take this time to figure out where we are in the chapter. Okay, few more pages. Um, like I had the math done in my head and then I forgot it promptly um, as soon as the ad was done. So sorry about this. Okay, all right. I know where I need to be. So let's see. Okay, I know exactly where I need to end for tonight. Um, all right, where were we? Sing a charm over him every day until you have charmed away his fears. Where shall we find a good charmer of these fears, Socrates? He said, now that you are leaving us. Greece is a large country, Sebes, he said, and there are good men in it. The tribes of foreigners are also numerous. You should search for such a charmer among them all, sparing neither trouble nor expense, for there is nothing on which you could spend your money to greater advantage. You must also search among yourselves, for you might not easily find people who could do this better than yourselves. That shall be done, said Sebes, but let us, if it pleases you, go back to the argument where we left it. Of course it pleases me. Splendid, he said. We must then ask ourselves something like this. What kind of thing is likely to be scattered? On behalf of what kind of thing should one fear this, and for what kind of thing should one not fear it? We should then examine to which class the soul belongs, and as a result, either fear for the soul or be of good cheer. What you say is true. Is not anything that is composite and a compound by nature liable to be split up into its component parts, and only that which is non-composite, if anything, is not likely to be split up? I think that is the case, said Sebes. Are not the things that always remain the same and in the same state most likely not to be composite, whereas those that vary from one time to another and are never the same are composite? I think that is so. Let us then return to those same things with which we were dealing earlier, to that reality of whose existence we are giving an account in our questions and answers. Are they ever the same and in the same state, or do they vary from one time to another? Can the equal itself, the beautiful itself, each thing in itself, the real, even be affected by any change whatever? Or does each of them that really is, being uniform by itself, remain the same and never in any way tolerate any change whatever? It must remain the same, said Sebes, and in the same state, Socrates. What of the many beautiful particulars, be they men, horses, clothes, or other such things, or the many equal particulars, and all those which bear the same name as those others? Do they remain the same, or in total contrast to those other realities, one might say, never in any way remain the same as themselves or in relation to each other? The latter is the case. They are never in the same state. These latter you could touch and see and perceive with the other senses, but those that always remain the same can be grasped only by the reasoning power of the mind. They are not seen but are invisible. That is altogether true, he said. Do you then want to assume two kinds of existences, the visible and the invisible? Let us assume this. And the invisible always remains the same, whereas the visible never does? Let us assume that too. Now one part of ourselves is the body, another part is the soul? Quite so. To which class of existence do we say the body is more alike and akin? To the visible, as anyone can see. What about the soul? Is it visible or invisible? It is not visible to men, Socrates, he said. Well, we meant visible and invisible to human eyes, or do you think we meant to some others? To human eyes. Then what do we say about the soul? Is it visible or not visible? Not visible. So it is invisible. Yes. So the soul is more like the invisible than the body, and the body more like the visible? Without any doubt, Socrates. Haven't we also said some time ago that when the soul makes use of the body to investigate something, be it through hearing or seeing or some other sense, for to investigate something through the body is to do it through the senses. It is dragged by the body to these things that are never the same, and the soul itself strays and is confused and dizzy, as if it were drunk, insofar as it is in contact with that kind of thing? Certainly. But when the soul investigates by itself, it passes into the realm of what is pure, ever existing, immortal, and unchanging, and being akin to this, it always stays with it whenever it is by itself and can do so. It ceases to stray and remains in the same state as it is in touch with things of the same kind, and its experience then is what is called wisdom? Altogether well said and very true, Socrates, he said. Judging from what we have said before and what we are saying now, to which of these two kinds do you think the soul is more alike or more akin? I think, Socrates, he said, that on this line of argument any man, even the dullest, would agree that the soul is altogether more like that which always exists in the same state rather than that which does not. What of the body? This is like the other. Look at it also this way. When the soul of the body the soul and the body are together, nature orders the one to be subject to be ruled, and the other to rule and to be master. Then again, which do you think is like the divine, and which like the mortal? Do you not think that the nature of the divine is to rule and to lead, whereas it is that of the mortal to be ruled and be subject? I do. Which does the soul resemble? Obviously, Socrates, the soul resembles the divine and the body resembles the mortal. Consider then, Cebes, whether it follows from all that has been said that the soul is most like the divine, deathless, intelligible, uniform, indissoluble, always the same as itself, whereas the body is most like that which is human, mortal, multiform, unintelligible, soluble, and never consistently the same. Have we anything else to say to show, my dear Cebes, that this is not the case? We have not. Well then, that being said, is it not natural for the body to dissolve easily and for the soul to be altogether indissoluble, or nearly so? Of course. You realize, he said, that when a man dies, the visible part, the body, which exists in the visible world, and which we call the corpse, whose natural lot it would be to dissolve, fall apart, and be blown away does not immediately suffer any of these things, but remains for a fair time, in fact, quite a long time if the man dies with his body in a suitable condition and at a favorable season. If the body is emaciated or embalmed, as in Egypt, it remains almost whole for a remarkable length of time, and even if the body decays, some parts of it, namely bones and sinews and the like, are nevertheless, one might say, deathless. Is that not so? Yes. Will the soul, the invisible part, which makes its way to a region of the same kind, noble and pure and invisible, to Hades in fact, to the good and wise God whither, God willing, my soul must soon be going, will the soul, being of this kind and nature, be scattered and destroyed on leaving the body, as the majority of men say? Far from it, my dear Cebes and Simmias, but what happens is much more like this. If it is pure when it leaves the body and drags nothing bodily with it, as it had no willing association with the body in life, but avoided it and gathered itself together by itself, and always practiced this, which is no other than practicing philosophy in the right way, in fact, training to die easily, or is this not training for death? It surely is. A soul in this state makes its way to the invisible, which is, like itself, the divine and immortal and wise, and arriving there it can be happy, having rid itself of confusion, ignorance, fear, violent desires, and the other human ills, and, as is said of the initiates, truly spend the rest of time with the gods. Shall we say this, Cebes, or something different? This is by Zeus, said Cebes. But I think that if the soul is polluted and impure when it leaves the body, having always been associated with it and served it, bewitched by physical desires and pleasures to the point at which nothing seems to exist for it but the physical, which one can touch and see or eat and drink or make use of for sexual enjoyment, and if that soul is accustomed to hate and fear and avoid that which is dim and invisible to the eyes, but intelligible and to be grasped by philosophy, do you think such a soul will escape pure and by itself? Impossible, he said. It is no doubt permeated by the physical, which constant intercourse and association with the body, as well as considerable practice, has caused to become ingrained in it? Quite so. We must believe, my friend, that this bodily element is heavy, ponderous, earthy, and visible. Through it, such a soul has become heavy and is dragged back to the visible region in fear of the unseen and of Hades. It wanders, as we are told, around graves and monuments where shadowy phantoms, images that such souls produce, have been seen. Souls that have not been freed and purified, but share in the visible, and are therefore seen. That is likely, Socrates. It is indeed, Cebes. Moreover, these are not the souls of good but of inferior men, which are forced to wander there, paying the penalty for their previous bad upbringing. They wander until their longings for that which accompanies them, the physical, again imprisons them in a body, and they are then, as is likely, bound to such characters as they have practiced in their life. What kind of characters do you say these are, Socrates? Those, for example, who have carelessly practiced gluttony, violence, and drunkenness are likely to join a company of donkeys or of some similar animals. Do you not think so? Very likely. Those who have esteemed injustice highly, and tyranny and plunder, will join the tribes of wolves and hawks and kites, or where else shall we say that they go? Certainly to those, said Cebes. And clearly the destination of the others will conform to the way in which they have behaved? Clearly, of course. The happiest of these, who will also have the best destination, are those who have practiced popular and social virtue, which they call moderation and justice, and which was developed by habit and practice, without philosophy or understanding. How are they the happiest? because it is likely that they will again join a social and gentle group, either of bees or wasps or ants, and then again the same kind of human group, and so be moderate men. That is likely. No one may join the company of the gods who has not practiced philosophy and is not completely pure when he departs from life. No one but the lover of learning. It is for this reason, my friends Simmias and Cebes, that those who practice philosophy in the right way keep away from all bodily passions, master them, and do not surrender themselves to them. It is not at all for fear of wasting their substance and of poverty, which the majority of the money lovers fear, nor for fear of dishonor and ill repute, like the ambitious and lovers of honor, that they keep away from them. That would not be natural for them, Socrates, said Cebes. By Zeus, no, he said. Those who care for their own soul and do not live for the service of their body dismiss all these things. They do not travel the same road as those who do not know where they are going, but believing that nothing should be done contrary to philosophy and their deliverance and purification, they turn to this and follow wherever philosophy leads. How so, Socrates? I will tell you, he said. The lovers of learning know that when philosophy gets hold of their soul, it is imprisoned in and clinging to the body, and that it is forced to examine other things it through it as through a cage and not by itself, and that it wallows in every kind of ignorance. Philosophy sees that the worst feature of this imprisonment is that it is due to desires, so that the prisoner himself is contributing to his own incarceration most of all. As I say, the lovers of learning know that philosophy gets hold of their soul when it is in that state, then gently encourages it and tries to free it by showing them that investigation through the eyes is full of deceit, as is that through the ears and the other senses. Philosophy then persuades the body to withdraw from the senses insofar as it is not compelled to use them, and bids the soul to gather itself together by itself, to trust only itself and whatever reality existing by itself the soul by itself understands, and not to consider as true whatever it examines by other means, for this is different in different circumstances, and is sensible and visible, whereas what the soul itself sees is intelligible and invisible. The soul of the true philosopher thinks that this deliverance must not be opposed, and so keeps away from pleasures and desires and pains as far as he can. He reflects that violent pleasure or pain or passion does not cause merely such evils as one might expect, such as one suffers when one has been sick or extravagant through desire, but the greatest and most extreme evil, though one does not reflect on this. What is that, Socrates? Asked Cebes. That the soul of every man, when it feels violent pleasure or pain in connection with some object, inevitably believes at the same time that what causes such feelings must be very clear and very true, which it is not. Such objects are mostly visible, are they not? Certainly. And does such an experience tie the soul to the body most completely? How so? Because every pleasure or pain provides, as it were, another nail to rivet the soul to the body and to weld them together. It makes the soul corporeal, so that it believes that truth is what the body says it is. As it shares the beliefs and delights of the body, I think it inevitably comes to share its ways and manner of life, and is unable ever to reach Hades in a pure state. It is always full of body when it departs, so that it soon falls back into another body and grows with it as if it had been sown into it. Because of this, it can have no part in the company of the divine, the pure, and the uniform. What you say is very true, Socrates, said Cebes. This is why genuine lovers of learning are moderate and brave. Or do you think it is for the reasons the majority says they are? I certainly do not. Indeed, no. This is how the soul of a philosopher would reason. It would not think that while philosophy must free it, it should, while being freed, surrender itself to pleasures and pains, and imprison itself again, thus laboring in vain like Penelope at her web. The soul of the philosopher achieves a calm from such emotions. It follows reason and ever stays with it, contemplating the true, the divine, which is not the object of opinion. Nurtured by this, it believes that one should live in this manner as long as one is alive, and after death arrive at what is akin and of the same kind, and escape from human evils. After such nurture there is no danger, Simmias conceives, that one should fear that on parting from the body the soul would be scattered and dissipated by the winds, and no longer be anything anywhere. When Socrates finished speaking, there was a long silence. He appeared to be concentrating on what had been said, and so were most of us, but Cebes and Simmias were whispering to each other. Socrates observed them and questioned them. Come, he said, do you think there is something lacking in my argument? There are still many doubtful points and many objections for anyone who wants a thorough discussion of these matters. If you are discussing some other subject, I have nothing to say, but if you have some difficulty about this one, do not hesitate to speak for yourselves and expound it if you think the argument could be improved, and if you think we will do better, take me along with you in the discussion. And that, I think, is where I'm actually going to stop. That puts us at just about the halfway mark through Phaedo, um, and my voice is about done. So it's as good a stopping point as any. Um, so I will pick it up on Friday, finish this out, and then we're going to get away from philosophy for a while, and I'm going to go back and read something else. I'm kicking around possibly reading David Bryan Davis, The Problem of Slavery in the Age of Revolution, is the name of it. That is one possibility. I'm also kicking around a couple of other ideas, some shorter books. Um, I'm completely blanking on the name of the one I wanted to mention. No, I don't have it right here in front of me, so um, it's one on occult philosophy. Dion Fortune, I think. I was thinking of reading it. It's a short book. Wouldn't be a bad one to read. It's been on my list a long time. Let's see. Oh, there it is, right there. I put it on the top shelf. The Esoteric Orders and Their Work. That's the one I was thinking of. That's by Dion Fortune. So that could be one. And I'll think of a couple others between now and Friday, and I'll maybe do a little survey, or not survey, poll on X to see if anybody has a preference. But that is that for tonight. Um, Thank you all for coming in and listening, even if you didn't get to discuss it. This is my first time ever reading any Plato. I read, I'm completely blanking again, Euthyphro on Friday. I'm reading this one. That's what I was advised to read first. And then I'm going to get away from it a while and let it marinate and then come back and read something else. But anyway, that's that for tonight. I am not going to raid anybody. I will just see you all in the next reading, which will be Friday, to finish out Phaedo. Have a good night.
Feeling shy some peace of mind. Not much luck I've had, but more sophisticated into the